Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Mullis has to be somewhere, so we're going to get started. I'd like to ask Jay Powell if he'll open us in prayer. Mr. Mullis.
Mr. Chairman, what a pleasure it is to be with you this morning. I used my Maxwell House joke yesterday, so I won't do that today.
Well, I'm glad to see you over. At least y'all are working one spot during the day.
We're going in late today, so we can, our procedure will have to have meetings before session in order to be eligible. So we're working hard to get as many House bills out as we can today.
If you'll just let your Rules Committee pick more than two.
We did quite a few.
Let them each have 6, and we might get this done.
I hear you. I think we got about 100 to pick from for Monday.
I'm not sure that Mr. Mullis's bill has on the white and blue sheet, but I think it's on the yellow. Did you find it, Mr. Mullis?
We don't have yellow back there, but
what number is that thing?
343, Senate Bill 343, regarding the Georgia High School Association. Representative Roberts is going to carry it for me if I have the pleasure of having it on the floor of the House.
I'm going to let Mr. Mullis present his bill. Y'all listen up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Georgia High School Association rules the roost when it comes to athletic activity for the Georgia high schools, and sometimes they're not very forthcoming in listening to those schools that have some concern about procedure or process or even being heard, and they have refused to hear them. My bill gets their attention. Make sure they hear those that aren't being heard, whether it's public schools or private schools. We're making the board so that you have to be an employee of the school instead of being retired and not being associated with the schools like they are currently. We're having an oversight committee with the legislature so that diversity will be part of the process. Currently, it's not very diverse like Georgia is. So, Mr. Chairman, without going any further, I think that gives a good landscape of the bill, and be glad to answer any questions, or if there's anybody who needs to talk to me personally, be glad to accommodate them.
Mr. Benton.
Yes, sir. I'm good. No, well, I have several schools that have problem with Georgia High School Association. Dade County, in my system, Trine, Gordon Lee, Ridgeland, Heritage, and that's just a few of the 8 high schools that I represent. I assure you that you have one too that has a problem with them. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. My first bill under modified open rule is Senate Bill 358. This bill will require all children be reported immediately if they're found to be missing. Today, that's covered in the law under parent and guardian, but where it's missing today is if they're in state care or foster care, etc. And this is just to ensure they get reported, because we know if children are reported immediately, the chance of bringing them home safe and sound is much greater. This is also an initiative that's gone through Rotary International to help protect children from ending up in human trafficking. I'd like to thank the Chairwoman of Health and Human Services for her help on that.
Are there any questions? Thank you.
And then next, a few below, is Senate Bill 386. This is to help protect against identity theft. I've worked very closely with all the way to Supreme Court justices and the county clerks to make sure that we are properly redacting information before it gets to the clerk's office. Great partnership between all parties, including Chairman Jacobs and Chairman Willard, for their help on this bill.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Oh, you are standing up over there. I'm sorry. Compliments of Jay Roberts. Mr. Harper, come to the stage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate it. And it is great to be with the House Rules Committee today, and it is a privilege to be in your presence, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Did you bring anything chocolate?
I did not.
Okay,
Mullis eat it before I could get it to you.
Who's next? Go ahead. Mr. Harper.
Senate Bill 322, Mr. Chairman, is, I believe it's under modified open on your blue sheet there. What this does, Mr. Chairman, is it protects our state's reptile as well as protect our state's landowners here in the state of Georgia from federal intrusion. What this bill will do is strike code in that would allow for you to pour chemicals or use electric means or mechanical means to disturb gopher dens or gopher holes to retrieve poisonous snakes. So we are striking that out due to U.S. Fish and Wildlife suggestions to our Department of Natural Resources. This is a DNR bill, and if the committee so deems necessary to send it to the floor, which I would appreciate. I've questioned who I've asked to tote this bill for me, but Representative Jay Roberts will be carrying it on the floor.
Mr. Willard.
Yes, sir. I would say that it is. If we do not pass this legislation, it is definitely has the ability for further federal intrusion into the state of Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate y'all's consideration.
Mr. Hill.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I bring before you, first on the modified structured rule, Senate Bill 98 provides that our state government will not be funding abortions or paying for abortions under the state health benefit plan, as well as through exchanges. I've been working with some of the members here in the House, and the reason for modified structured request is that I have a proposed amendment to address some of the tweaks that I've heard from Legislative Council after the bill came out of the House Insurance Committee, to make sure it's accurate according to the requests of the House. I've got copies for the chairman at this time. And I've been working with.
Just hang with me a
Yes,
little
sir.
bit. I've got too much paper. I don't have the amendment.
I've got them right here. I was going to
Yeah,
approach.
but well, I require them to be handed out. And now there's two apparently wandering around here.
I actually have another copy.
It needs a House member's signature on it before we even print it. And so I'm gonna hold off on that. I'll let Mr. Setzler handle that at whatever time I do it.
Do you have an indication when that might be, just so I can plan, sir?
It will either be done Tuesday morning or during a call meeting of this Rules Committee.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the latter.
Just
Okay.
plan on Tuesday morning. And
Okay, and I'd like to also bring to your attention, it's Senate Bill 281. It didn't make your calendar. Here's the reason why is I've been dealing with 36 House bills in the Finance Committee, which are still working through those. We got a hearing later today, and I wasn't able to get in time the your form, but it was submitted late in the afternoon or early evening yesterday. It's Senate Bill 281. I spoke to the chairman a moment ago, right before. I'd like to just mention it to you real quickly. The state health benefit plan does not provide an option these days for a high deductible health savings account option, which provides potentially up to a $1,500 per year income tax credit. Under federal law, if you as a family contribute into your health savings account up to, it's a little bit over $6,500 per year. We don't provide that option anymore under the state health benefit plan. I propose that it come maybe potentially under a structured rule. And I just want to bring that to your attention. It was a late arriving, and it was frankly because I've been dealing with 3 dozen bills, and I just
in other words, it's our fault that you didn't get your bill in here.
No, sir, it's my fault.
No, that's a good excuse.
It's the dog ate the form, but it's actually trying to get it all done, sir, and that's.
I'm glad to see that y'all are working so hard on all of our bills. So that's a good excuse. It's our fault. We put too many bills over there for y'all to do your business.
I'm working it, and we've got a hearing at 10:30, so I'll get out of your way in a minute.
I'll be waiting with bated breath on how that hearing comes out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait a second. Mr. Leader.
Thank you. Senator, good morning. 281, I'm intrigued by that. I have to admit I haven't read it yet and hadn't seen it, but with your explanation and our summary that we have on the yellow sheet here, is there a fiscal note for that, or is there a cost to the state for that?
Chairman, that's great, Leader. That's a great question. The answer is no, there's not, and here's the reason why. Under a health reimbursement arrangement, the state, the employer, can contribute money to an employee's account. Under a health savings account, 100% of those dollars come from the employee, and they carry over, they roll over. It's like almost like a health care IRA, similar. So because there's no state funds ever allowed to go into those accounts, no employer funds here, then there's no requirement for a fiscal note. It's just the individual. I've used one in the state of Georgia until we eliminated it this year, since they were allowed, I guess, about 4, 5, 6 years ago. Thank you, sir. Thank you, committee members and chairman.
No more questions. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that particular bill, Senate Bill 98, I have a technical amendment I'm proposing under line 37, where it says expenses for abortion procedures except to the extent permitted under rules. I'm requesting a technical amendment, and the amendment will say expenses for abortion services except to the extent permitted under policies, rules. That would be the only change.
Any questions, Mr. Smith, on his amendment? He's adding policies. Okay. Is there a second to his? Have a motion and a second. Any opposition? No opposition. All right. So what that's going to do to you on 98, it's a technical amendment, and we will incorporate the change into the bill, and it will be a Rules Committee substitute.
Mr. Beach.
Mr. Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Rules Committee. I bring before you Senate Bill 381. It's the Georgia First Informer Broadcast Act. And basically, a first informer broadcaster means a broadcaster in Georgia who makes application to the Georgia GEMA for designation as a first informer broadcaster pursuant to rules and regulations by the Director of GEMA. And what this will do, and what the effects of this will do, is they'll have access to areas by an emergency for the purpose of restoring, repairing, and resupplying any facility or equipment critical to the ability to broadcast, have access to distribution of fuel, food, water, and supplies, and not have vehicles, fuel, food, water, or supplies seized or condemned. This is a public safety measure that facilitates emergency broadcast and is unrelated to news gathering. It's supported by the Georgia Association of Broadcasters, and we had no opposition in either committee, in the Senate or the House, and I would appreciate your support of Senate Bill 381.
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, under modified open rule, I have Senate Bill 326, and what this does, it authorizes private colleges and the university's authority simply to have a meeting by teleconference.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gooch.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Senate agree to House Bill 60 as amended. It's a good gun bill, sir.
What do you want?
Just kidding. Senate Bill 392 is a bill that allows for military vehicles to be permitted and titled in Georgia, and they're exempt from the federal emission standards. Lots of hobbyist groups, veteran groups use these vehicles on parades and so forth. We also have contractors and farmers that use them, especially down in South Georgia, out in the fields, helping to get their crops out of the fields.
No,
yes, sir. Good ag bill. I would appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Millar.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
How
Happy to
you-
report that all the retirement bills for the House members have been taken care of. They're on their way, and
Hey,
I'd like to.
you've had most of your stuff. Don't go bragging.
Just want to keep you informed. Modified structure. SB 293. This is a bill to level the playing field for taxpayers. Came through Chairman Willard's Judiciary Committee. It allows taxpayers to request all the data that will be used on how the assessment values comes up after the mass appraisal is done. They're allowed to get that in writing in advance of their hearings. They're allowed to request interviews. They're allowed to record interviews. We worked with the assessment group. Probably, I think we had the Cobb, Fulton, DeKalb, people involved. Went through subcommittee, made a lot of changes, did the same thing, general committee. I think the consensus was said at the end of the day that was a good consensus. So everyone seemed to be happy with it. And as I said, it's a good property tax appeal bill, benefits the consumer.
Questions? No questions.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Murphy.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you Senate Bill 298. Senate Bill 298 started out as a very simple bill. I think it was one page. I think now it's 21 pages, so it's 298 by substitute. It started out just asking that allowing people that are seeking handicap parking permits to go ahead and go to the doctor, and the doctor can write a prescription on secured paper and let them get their handicap parking permit. Currently, they have to get that notarized, and you know, frankly, I can go to the doctor and get Oxycontin, and he can write me a prescription. I can take it to the pharmacy, and it doesn't have to be notarized. Oxycontin can kill me, but the handicap parking permit has to be notarized, and if the doctor doesn't have a notary, then you're in there in a wheelchair, crutches or whatever, and you got to go hunt up a notary. So that was the original bill, but then the substitute, the Department of Driver Services had a lot of cleanup language that they needed, and that's what this bill does. It provides a vehicle for that. It also allows them to have some modest increases in some fees, which they hadn't had for the last 10 years to help them administer. But that's mainly what the bill does, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions of Mr. Murphy? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cowser. Wait just a second, Mr. Murphy. You just hang tight for a second. On your desk, you've got an amendment offered by Mr. Powell. Mr. Powell, you'd like to tell us what that is?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment I proposed in the original bill had a implementation date of January the 1st, and this puts it on July the 1st of the current year, if passed.
Okay, I just wanted you to hear it. Mr. Powell, would you like to put yours in the form of a motion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we adopt the amendment to Senate Bill 298.
All right, do I hear a second? Anybody opposed to that? That'll be on the floor amendment. All right. Now, Mr. Cowser, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I ask for your favorable consideration of SB 374. It's under modified open rule. This is the bill that simply changes the term slum to pockets of blight to encourage use of the urban redevelopment law. It has attached to it in your committee House Bill 960, which was Chairman Roberts' bill, that also includes the Atlanta Beltline to consider that an area that can be used for the urban redevelopment law.
Any questions on that? No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wait a second. Well, yeah, we do too. I don't know who it is. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Balfour, it sure is good to see you.
It's good to see you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We have before you Senate Bill 391, which is a good pro-military bill that encourages medical facilities to make a good faith effort in applying for TRICARE. TRICARE is military insurance, not just for active military, but also for veterans. A lot of the issue with TRICARE is more of a federal issue than a state issue. If you look at Medicare, TRICARE pays about 50 cents on the dollar to Medicare, which is wrong, but that's a federal issue. That's inside the Beltway in Washington problem. We can't solve that. But what happens is the soldiers end up having to go to medical facilities in general that are inside TRICARE, and so someone from Adel, Georgia may have to drive to the VA hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm not saying the VA hospital in Atlanta, Georgia isn't trying to do a great job. I'm sure they are. But if all veterans have to go to one hospital, it's going to be hard to take care of them. And it would be so much easier and so much better if TRICARE were to pay like Medicare did, and the doctors in Adel, Georgia could take care of those patients. And the hospitals all over the state could take care of those people. And these are men and women who've picked up arms, and you sleep well at night because they're defending your freedoms and putting their lives in the line. So this is just a small thing to help encourage hospitals to use a good faith effort to apply for a TRICARE network.
Mr. Setzler.
I can't tell you that because I'm not in the medical business, but I can tell you that the hospitals have no problem with this bill whatsoever. The hospitals have no concern about this bill, and they don't believe that this is an additional hoop really that's going to stop them from doing anything they're doing as of right now.
I get that for hospitals. What other medical facilities does this apply to? Is this going to have a consequence that they can be able to change this?
I have had no one object to this bill. I've had no medical facilities come up to me and say they have a problem with this bill or they have a concern with this bill, and if they did, we would have addressed it.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Heath.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I was here to ask for Senate Bill 60, the third bill down under the modified open rule.
That's the communication stuff.
Yes, sir. Save the taxpayers a little money.
I think you explained it well enough yesterday.
Oh.
I don't see any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, members of the committee.
Mr. Lindsay.
My Senate sponsor to a bill that I'm carrying in the House could not be here today, but it's Senate Bill 367. It's a simple tweak to the Metropolitan Area Planning and Development Commission. It simply would allow the president of the Atlanta City Council to serve on the ARC. That's the only thing it does, and the president of the Atlanta City Council would be the only public official affected. I'm doing it at the, Senator Hill and I are doing it at the request of our city, which is to appoint the president of the city council to the ARC.
Okay. Ms. Dempsey? Yes. Wait a second. I'm sorry for the microphones. They're broken and we can't get them fixed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To ask for Senator Unterman for SR 981, a study committee affecting violence against healthcare workers. It's become an increasing concern with some of the changes in mental health service providing right now. And a lot of our emergency rooms particularly are confiscating many scary weapons, and this is to begin to study how we can address that.
Ms. Cooper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to put my name by SR 981. They brought pictures of what was collected in a very short time, the weapons, and it's unbelievable in what they're threatening emergency room personnel with. Also, I'd like to put my name by 358. That's the missing children reporting it's a problem, and Senate Bill 352, which is the Lupus Council. Thank you.
Ms. Abrams?
I'd like to put my name beside SB 367 in a show of bipartisan support of my colleague, Mr. Lindsay.
When we walk out, you be sure and hold hands. Mr. Powell?
And 392 is motor vehicle bill, and also 381.
What was the first one? I missed one.
298.
298.
Motor vehicle committee bill. We've saw the Christmas tree up on the senator's bill.
Okay.
And 292 and 381.
I can't find any of those. Try them again, Alan. I'm missing some. Try them again. I've got 298. What's after that?
Senate Bill 298, Senate Bill 392, which is a motor vehicle bill, and also Senate Bill 381, very popular and very good bill.
Okay. Mr. Stevens on the front down here, Aaron.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put my name beside House Bill 381. It's a big deal for those of us on the coast.
Mr. Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by Senate Bill 341, the probate bill, Senate Bill 98, the federal abortion, and Senate Bill 298, the life bill.
The pro tem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a few things I wanted to mention to you. I would like to, Senate Bill 343, the Rules Chairman's bill on the Georgia High School Athletics, Georgia High School Athletic Association. I'd like to hold off on that bill because I'd like to offer an amendment to that, and I don't have it prepared yet. I'd like to amend it with House Bill 897, which is a very important bill to the House. It's Title 20 cleanup bill that's been gutted in the Senate, and I think upon further reflection, I'd like them to reconsider that action. And then I'd also like to hold off on Senate Bill 391 and Senate Bill 304. I'd like to have the opportunity, since they're modified structure, and I don't have the amendment yet from the Governor's Corps Leader, Christian Coomer, but I'd like to add a very important amendment to that the Governor has an interest in, House Bill 923, which did not make it out of the Senate Health Committee yesterday. I was going to add it to Senate Bill 291, which is modified open, but we can do that on the floor, so I don't need to hold that bill. I would like to point out that I do not intend to add House Bill 923, the Governor's bill, to Senator Unterman's bill, which is Senate Bill 350, which is what is referred to as the foster care bill. I'd like to keep that bill clean.
You requested a hold on 391.
And 304 and Senate Bill, well, I'm not sure what your intention is on whether it's modified open or modified structured. So Senate Bill 343, if it's modified open, it can go forward. I'll take care of it on the floor, but or the senator or the Governor's floor leader will. But if it's a modified structured, I need to wait on it so that I can offer that amendment in committee.
Where'd you come from? Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. I won't go over the group of bills that I've already discussed, but be happy to answer questions. Would like to point out to the committee that there is one more bill that needs to be brought out. That's SB 324. It's an agency bill dealing with the Department of Juvenile Justice, allowing them to train their intensive probation teams so that they can be post-certified.
Any questions of Mr. Stone? No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I beg your pardon?
If you don't mind, I do have a question on one of his bills.
Okay.
332. Can you just clarify for me why we're taking the magistrate fine from $200 to $500?
Yes, their contempt powers haven't been changed in 28 years, according to testimony in hearing. They are on a comparable stature with probate courts and municipal courts, which both have $500 limits. Certainly.
Mr. Willard, do you have any questions? Okay. All right. Mr. Willard.
I'd like to put my name also beside Senate Bill 341, Senator Stone's bill on the probate courts. This is a bill that came out of our committee. It was a good bill. I'd like to hold up on Senate Bill 374. I'd like to study that some more.
Is any member of this committee got anything they want to hang on one of these bills? Apparently it's the only way we're going to get anything passed over there. Y'all, I'm not inclined to put anything on the calendar. I've got here's your calendar. Under modified open, H.R. 1265. Modified any objection? It's on. Modified open, H.R. 1655. Any objection? Modified structure, SB 383. Do I hear a move? Any objection? That's the calendar.